Hello everybody! Welcome to the Warhammer 40k basic tutorial. Today we're going to be going over a lot of the most basic rules, how to get started playing 40k, and just some of the basics of getting yourself a table set up so that you can have a full game to play with your friends. We're going to be going over all of the basics, such as all of the different phases that come in the game, as well as how to read a data card and how to actually go through and go about playing a game of 40k. We're going to be going through a simple first turn so you can get an idea of what the back and forth will be like, and then you'll be able to get to see them all on the table and get a feel for what the game will look like as well. So the first thing that we're going to be covering is mustering your army. This is the portion that happens before any models are set on the table, before any table is even set up to begin with, the point values and getting your army built and ready. So every unit in Warhammer 40k has its own data sheet. This data sheet has all the information that you need regarding all of the rules on that model, as well as the point values for what they actually cost. Now, on average, most people play this game at 2,000 points. So all of your units added up together equaling out to 2,000 points total. This can be flexible. You don't have to play 2,000. Playing 2,000 is also rather expensive to get into, so I highly recommend that you just jump in with a regular combat patrol, which will give you around 500 points to play with, and it'll be a much smaller scale game than playing your full 2,000 point game of Warhammer 40,000. Once you and your friend have both of your armies built and you've agreed upon to point level, that's whenever you get into actually setting up the table to play. So we're going to get into that, and I'm going to show you how to do it in the easiest way possible. For this demonstration, I'm going to be using a 2,000 point table, which is 44 inches by 60 inches, but I will also put all of the other sizes for the point levels on screen now. The first step will be to determine your deployment, primary objective, and mission rule using the mission deck, which can be purchased from Games Workshop. These mission cards are chosen randomly and dictate how the entirety of that game of 40k is going to be played. Because of the random factor, this means that every game that you play will have different rules and be an entirely different experience. Now, what I recommend is leaving all of these cards on the side of the table where both players have easy access to them in case you need to check any rules. Now that your cards are drawn, you will use your deployment card to place objective markers across the board in the positions indicated on the card. For this example, we will be using the Dawn of War deployment, which will be on screen now. The next portion is terrain. The greatest part about 40k is that you do not need to have the fancy pieces of terrain to play. You can use random boxes and other household objects to create line of sight blocking pieces on the table. Alternatively, if you do decide to go out and get yourself some terrain pieces, they really do liven up the table and make the whole tabletop look a little bit more realistic. Now comes the fatal roll-off. The roll-off determines which player will be deploying first, and also determines who will be the attacker and the defender for this game. Once again, referring to the deployment card, you will now run a line of dice across your deployment zone so that you know what range you have to place your models within. Now that both armies are fully deployed, each player will roll a d6, with the higher result being the player that takes first turn. Each player turn consists of the command phase, the movement phase, the shooting phase, the charge phase, and the fight phase, which will all be covered in depth coming up. During your movement phase, each unit in your army gets to move up to a set amount of inches based upon the number that you can find on each of their individual data cards. The shooting phase is simple. All of your units get the opportunity to shoot their long-range weapons into other enemy units. For this example, we'll be having a skull cannon firing onto a squad of battle sisters. All of the information that you will need for the shooting phase can be found on each individual data card for your particular unit. This will give you the roll that you need in order to hit the shot, as well as the strength of that shot so that you can determine the wound roll. That wound roll is determined by this scale that I will put on screen here. The number of attacks is determined by looking at the weapon's attack value. In this case, the skull cannon has a d6 plus 2 attack. What this means is that you roll a d6, take the result, and add 2. However, please take note of the blast keyword. The blast keyword means that for every 5 models in the enemy unit, you get an additional die to that attack. In this instance, I rolled a 6. What that means is that I get 6 dice plus the 2 from the attack value. However, remembering the blast keyword, I get an additional 2 dice for the 10 models in the Sisters of Battle Squad. For these dice rolls, again referring to the Skull Cannon datasheet, I need a 3 or higher in order to hit. This is the part where that wound chart will come in handy. I have discovered by asking my opponent that the toughness value on the Sisters of Battle is 3. Looking at my own data card, I can see that the Skull Cannon has a strength of 9. This meaning I am more than double over the toughness value and only need to roll a 2 or higher in order to wound. 2 more pieces of important information can be found here on the data card, those being the save value and the armor piercing value. The save value determines the likelihood that you are to save a wound that is incoming from an enemy. In this case, the Skull Cannon saves on a 4 up. However, the Skull Cannon weapon also has an armor piercing value of -1. This reduces the chances that your opponent can make a save roll by increasing the number that they need to hit that save. The Sisters of Battle have a 3 up natural save. This meaning the Skull Cannon at AP -1 requires them to save on a 4 or higher. Next up is the charge phase. This is where your units that are more friendly to melee are able to cross the distance and get into close combat with an enemy unit. The way that this works is that you measure the distance between the 2 units and then roll 2d6, attempting to reach the number required to make it. If you were to roll the correct number or higher, your unit has successfully charged into close combat. Similarly to the shooting phase, all of the information that you need can be found in the melee weapons section of that unit's data card. In this case, the Flesh Hounds have the Gore-Drenched Fangs, which each have 3 attacks. Since there are 5 models in the unit, that means I will get a total of 15 attacks. These attacks have a weapon skill of 3, meaning I have to hit on a 3 or higher. The strength of the Gore-Drenched Fangs is 5, but the toughness value on the Rhino that I have charged into is 9, meaning I am swinging at a disadvantage and will need 5s in order to wound. The Rhino now gets to make its saves as well. The Rhino has a 3 up as its base save value, and the Gore-Drenched Fangs have an AP -1. This means that the Rhino will need to roll 4s in order to make saves. These wounds are marked by placing a die with the remaining number of wounds next to or on top of the Rhino. The Rhino will now get its swings back on the Flesh Hounds. Once all of your units have gotten the chance to do all of the actions that they can take on your turn, the turn then passes over to your opponent. These turns will pass back and forth a total of 10 times for 5 total battle rounds. You are collecting points based on the primary objective and the mission rule throughout the game, and whatever player has the most points at the end of the game is declared the winner. And we come to the end of the tutorial. If you have any other questions or comments that you would like to ask, I am either sitting in the room with you or you're watching on YouTube, and you can ask me in the comment section below. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch, and I hope that you have some fun playing Warhammer 40k.